What would you do if the man you trusted destroyed you in front of all of London? Lady Seraphina Blythe walked into the cathedral believing she was about to become a wife. Instead, she was humiliated at the altar, replaced by another woman, and left to watch her entire world collapse in a single day. Her name was ruined, her father was broken, and society buried her before she even had a chance to defend herself. But Seraphina did not vanish because she was defeated. She vanished because someone in the shadows saw what everyone else missed and gave her the one thing stronger than pity power. When she returned, London no longer saw a rejected bride. They saw the most dangerous woman in England. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now let's begin the story. The first thing Seraphina Blythe noticed was not the candles. It was the silence. Not the sacred kind, the kind that lived inside marble and stained glass, but a controlled hush. The careful quiet of London's finest families, sitting shoulder to shoulder, waiting to witness a perfect match become permanent history. The vast cathedral breathed cold air along its stone floors. Light spilled through the colored windows above, casting ribbons of crimson gold and deep blue across the aisle like spilled wine. The organ played slowly, steadily, as if it could hold the world together by pure rhythm. Seraphina stood at the far end of the aisle, framed by towering pillars and a sea of polished heads and jeweled shoulders. She felt the weight of 1,000 eyes turned toward her as one. She should have trembled. She should have felt small. Instead, she felt ready. Her gown was ivory soft as a cloud, but cut with quiet strength, structured shoulders, a long, clean line lace, so fine it looked like frost. She stepped forward with her spine straight, her chin level, her hands calm at her sides. She did not walk like a girl asking permission. She walked like a woman stepping into the life she'd earned. Whispers drifted along the pews like perfume smoke. A perfect alliance. The Blythes are fortunate. Lord Hale is ambitious but handsome enough to make the ambition charming. Seraphina kept her gaze forward. Not because she didn't hear them. She heard everything, but because she had learned long ago that the tone fed on attention. If you refused to react, they starved. At the altar stood Sebastian Hale. He looked immaculate, black coat tailored perfectly, cravat crisp hair combed back with casual precision. His mouth held the faintest suggestion of a smile, just enough warmth to reassure the crowd, not enough to betray any true feeling. He had always understood performance. When Seraphina reached him, he took her hand. His fingers were warm, his palm steady. And for the briefest moment, she believed the months of promises were real. He leaned closer, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Are you well?" She swallowed, surprising herself with how soft her answer sounded. "I've waited for this day for so long." His thumb brushed her knuckles. He smiled almost. For a heartbeat, the cathedral felt less cold. Then his grip tightened. Not in affection, in something sharper, something calculating. And just as quickly he released pressure, as if he'd caught himself doing something too visible. Seraphina blinked. The change was so fast no one else would notice. But she did. She always noticed. The vicar began the rite, voice measured and solemn. The words were ancient, worn smooth by centuries of vows, spoken by people who had no right to them. "Will you take this woman?" The cathedral held its breath. Sebastian let go of her hand. It wasn't dramatic. No sweeping movement, no theatrical gesture. Just absence. Seraphina's fingers remained suspended for a moment, empty in the air where his palm had been. Sebastian stepped back half a pace. He did not look at her. "I cannot continue this wedding." The words were clear, flat, not shouted. He didn't need to shout. The room was already silent enough to carry a whisper to the ceiling. A murmur erupted instantly like a flock of birds startled from a tree. What did he say? No, surely not. Is this a jest? Seraphina's heart did not race. It stopped. She turned toward him slightly as if a small angle could correct the world.
Oh my God, what is he doing? Please,
Sebastian.
no.
His jaw tightened. He kept his gaze forward as though he were addressing the cathedral itself rather than the woman he had promised to marry. "I cannot bind my future to someone who no longer brings value to it." The word value struck the air like a slap. Seraphina stared at his profile, the clean line of his cheek, the controlled shape of his mouth. She searched for a crack, anything human. A nothing. It was then she saw movement in the front pews. A woman stood, not slowly, not uncertainly, with the certainty of someone who had rehearsed the moment in her mind until it felt like destiny. Arabella Vane rose in a gown of deep red so dark it bordered on black in the cathedral's shadow. The color was obscene against Seraphina's ivory. She stepped into the aisle, her posture graceful, her eyes bright with something close to hunger. A noble woman, whispered voice, half horrified, half delighted. "No, it cannot be." Arabella walked forward. The vicar's hands trembled slightly against the holy book. Sebastian finally looked down at the vicar, not Seraphina. "There are truths," he said, "that cannot be ignored." A servant appeared at Sebastian's side holding a sealed letter on a silver tray. Wax, elegant handwriting, a scent of ink and accusation. The vicar hesitated. "My lord, surely this is not the place." "Read it," Sebastian said, cutting him off. "If we respect virtue, then we respect the truth." Seraphina's lips parted. "Sebastian, what are you doing?" He still did not look at her. The vicar broke the seal. His eyes skimmed the lines. Color drained from his face. He cleared his throat, the sound harsh in the silence, and began to read. It was written like a confession, like shame, neatly arranged into sentences. It suggested Seraphina had carried on an inappropriate attachment with a man whose name did not belong in a church. It implied secret meetings, indecent affection, a stain on her honor that could not be washed away by marriage. Gasps scattered through the pews. Whispers multiplied. Seraphina felt as if the cathedral floor had tilted. "That is not true," she said, voice steady only because her body had gone numb. "That is a lie." For the first time, Sebastian turned his head and looked directly at her. His eyes were unfamiliar. Not cruel in an obvious way. Sebastian wasn't a man who wasted emotion on cruelty. He was worse than cruel. He was indifferent. "Then explain it," he said. Seraphina opened her mouth, and for a moment she truly believed explanation would save her. That if she spoke clearly enough, if she stood tall enough, the world would remember who she was. But the Tan did not care who you were, only what they could believe about you. "It's forged," she said. Someone wants to ruin me." Sebastian's mouth tightened as if she were exhausting him. "My honor will not allow me to gamble my name on your denial." Arabella's lips curved slow and satisfied. The vicar stammered, "My lord, the right." "It will continue," Sebastian said. He turned toward Arabella and took her hand. Right there, in front of the altar, in front of the stained glass saints who looked down in silent judgment. Seraphina's breath caught sharply, the first crack in her calm. He lifted Arabella's hand like a trophy. I will not allow my future to be destroyed by a mistake. Arabella looked at Seraphina as if she were examining a discarded garment. Some women, Arabella murmured, voice delicate and bright, are chosen. She stepped closer still, holding Sebastian's hand. And some, she continued, are replaced. A small laugh escaped someone's mouth in the pews. Then another. Then a cluster quickly silenced, because even amusement could be dangerous if it became too loud. Seraphina did not cry. Her face remained composed. Only her fingers curled tightly into her palms beneath the lace of her gloves.
I believe I am.
The vicar shook his head, nearly pleading.
Scandalous.
This cannot. This should not. Sebastian's voice turned colder. It will. He faced the vicar again. With the worthy bride. Arabella stepped into Seraphina's place like she had always belonged there. Like Seraphina's ivory had merely been a placeholder until the true color arrived. The ceremony continued. Not paused, not questioned, as if Seraphina had never existed. Seraphina stood beside the altar alone while vows meant for her were spoken over another woman's hand. And in the front pew her father rose. Earl Theodore Blythe looked pale ashen, almost gray, his mouth slightly open, as though he could not form the shape of the betrayal he was witnessing. He stood abruptly, drawing attention. Sebastian, he said, voice shaking with restrained fury. What are you doing? That is my daughter. No one answered. Not Sebastian. Not Arabella. Not even the vicar whose eyes refused to meet the earl's. The tone did what it always did when confronted with genuine feeling. They looked away. The earl stepped forward one pace as if he might climb the altar himself and drag Seraphina back into dignity by force. Then he froze. His hand went to his chest. His breath hitched. A sound escaped him, not a cry, but the beginning of one. No, he whispered. This cannot. His knees weakened. He staggered backward.
Chuyện gì vậy ạ?
Earl Blythe, someone gasped.
Bác ơi,
He collapsed
bác có
into
sao
the
không?
pew, his body folding with horrifying softness. A few people leaned toward him, half alarmed, half irritated that the spectacle was splitting. But the ceremony did not stop. Seraphina turned sharply, the first true panic in her eyes. Father. She took one step. Then the sound of Sebastian's voice speaking vows behind her snapped the air like a whip. Seraphina stopped. Her breath went shallow. She looked between two realities, her father struggling for air, and Sebastian pledging himself to Arabella as if her existence had already been erased. The entire cathedral chose Sebastian. They chose the ceremony. They chose their comfort. They chose the version of events that required them to do nothing. Seraphina stood still, and something inside her went quiet. She closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, the softness had drained away. She did not run. She did not scream. She did not beg. She stood through the remainder of the rite like a statue carved from ice. When Sebastian and Arabella turned to face the congregation, as husband and wife, applause rose, polite, measured, careful. Seraphina did not flinch. She simply turned and walked out. Rain met her at the cathedral steps, cold and relentless. The world outside smelled of wet stone and carriage mud. Her dress immediately darkened at the hem. Her hair dampened in seconds. A servant hurried after her. "My lady, your carriage." Seraphina did not turn. "No," the servant faltered. "My lady, you cannot." I said no. Her voice was not loud, but it was final. She stepped down into the rain. Behind her, music resumed. Laughter. Congratulations. As if nothing had happened, Seraphina paused at the bottom step for one moment, rain sliding down her lashes. She looked straight ahead into the gray London street and whispered almost to herself, "So this is what the world is." Then she walked forward until the cathedral disappeared behind her. That night, the Blythe house was not filled with mourning. It was filled with urgency. "Fetch the doctor. Hurry, please." Servants rushed through corridors. Doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed. A candle fell and was hastily relit. Seraphina did not see any of it, because Seraphina was gone. In the empty room that had been prepared for her wedding night, her reflection remained an imprint on the mirror, a ghost of lace and crushed hope. Morning arrived like an insult. Gray light, cold air, a city already hungry for new scandal. At dawn, a servant stood at a door that Seraphina would never open again. His voice shook. "The Earl has passed in the night." No grand announcement, no mourners gathered at the door, no dignified procession, just a death that felt like London sealing the Blythes into the ground. And then came the other truth, whispered in corners, spoken low, so it sounded like pity rather than accusation. "The estate has been mortgaged for months." They were already on the edge. If the marriage had gone through, it might have held them together. Seraphina was not there to hear it, but the city heard, and the city understood. Sebastian had not only abandoned a bride, he had abandoned a collapsing house. He had watched it fall and stepped away so the rubble would not touch his boots. By afternoon, the rumors had grown teeth. She was left at the altar. The Earl died from the shock. The Blythes are finished. Perhaps the letter was true. Perhaps she deserved it. London always deserved its cruelty. And Seraphina Blythe disappeared. Not in a romantic way, not in a mysterious way that invited rescue. She disappeared the way the ruined disappear, quietly, completely, as if the world had decided she was no longer real. That is how she would have ended, if someone had not already been watching from the shadows. She lost everything in a single night, her marriage, her name, and even her family. But was that truly the end, or the moment that changed her fate forever? Let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe before we step into the most intense part of the story. The carriage moved through the night with a steady, deliberate rhythm. Rain tapped gently against the window, a softer sound than the laughter she still heard in her memory. Seraphina sat inside her gown, damp, her hands folded tightly in her lap, as if holding herself together was a physical task. Her mind was blank in a way that frightened her more than panic would have. Across from her, in the dimness, a man sat without moving. She could not see his face clearly at first, only the outline of broad shoulders, the quiet weight of stillness. She looked down at her hands, her fingers raw from gripping lace. "It's over," she murmured. The man's voice came slowly, low, controlled. "No." Seraphina's throat tightened. She turned slightly, squinting into the darkness. "Who are you?" A pause. "Someone who is taking you away from what would kill you." "Kill me." She let out a humorless breath. "They already did." The man did not disagree. He allowed the silence to sit between them until she felt it pressing against her ribs.
And you'll regret yours.
Then he said quietly, "What they did to you was not personal." Seraphina's head snapped up, her voice sharpened for the first time since the altar. "Not personal." The man leaned forward enough that the candlelight from outside briefly caught his face. Strong features, dark hair, eyes like winter. Duke Lucian Blackthorne. The name alone was a warning in London society. A man of wealth so old it was almost myth. A man whose influence did not require his presence. He was rarely seen, and when he was, people lowered their voices without knowing why. Seraphina swallowed hard. My lord. Lucian's gaze remained fixed on her. They did what they did because you became convenient to destroy, he said. London doesn't punish sin, Seraphina. London punishes weakness. Her stomach twisted at the sound of her name on his tongue. He spoke it like fact, not like admiration. You watched, she whispered. The memory flashed a man at the back of the cathedral, still as stone. You were there, yes, and you did nothing. Lucian did not flinch. No one would have believed you if I had. Seraphina stared at him, stunned by the cruelty of the truth. Lucian continued, voice calm. And if I had interfered, you would have remained what they wanted you to be. She frowned. What is that? A victim, Lucian said simply. Seraphina's hands tightened. The carriage rolled on. Hours later, she found herself standing in a remote estate far from the gossiping streets of London. The house was old stone, lit warmly from within, surrounded by trees that stood like guards. A fire burned in the hearth of the room she was shown. A dress lay folded neatly on the bed. A tray of food waited untouched. Lucian stood at the doorway, not entering, as if he understood instinctively that comfort offered too quickly would feel like insult. Seraphina turned to face him, her voice thin. You brought me here because you pity me. Lucian's expression did not soften. I do nothing out of pity. The words should have hurt. Instead, they steadied her. He added, You have been lied to your entire life about what matters, about what protects you. I am not interested in continuing the lie. Seraphina's shoulders dropped slightly. What do you want from me? She asked. Lucian's gaze sharpened. Nothing you cannot choose. The next morning the sky was colorless. Seraphina sat by the window, hair loose, face, bare eyes hollow. She looked like a painting of ruin. Lucian entered and placed a folder on the table. Read. She opened it. Names, estates, debts, holdings, mortgage agreements. Her brow furrowed. I don't understand. Lucian's voice was even. Everyone who sat in that cathedral is in those pages. Seraphina looked up. He continued, They do not live by honor. They live by leverage. They breathe on borrowed coin. She let out a bitter laugh. And what am I supposed to do with this? Lucian met her eyes. Learn how to hold it. Seraphina stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. I was humiliated at the altar, she said. My father died, and you're talking to me about power. Lucian stepped closer, but not too close. It is precisely because you are humiliated that you can begin, he said. You have nothing left to lose, only what you choose to rebuild. A long silence. Then Lucian said clearly, I am not offering you love. Seraphina's lips tightened. I am offering you a path. Her pulse fluttered. A path to what? Lucian's voice dropped slightly. To never being replaced again. That night Seraphina stood alone before a mirror. She still looked like the bride they destroyed. She closed her eyes and heard the laughter. Heard Arabella's silky voice. Some women are chosen, and some are replaced. Her fingers trembled. For one moment she imagined returning to London quietly, wearing gray, living small, letting them forget her. It would be easier. It would also be death. Seraphina opened her eyes. No, she whispered. The next morning she found Lucian in a study lined with books and sealed documents. He glanced up once, Seraphina's voice did not shake. If I accept, what do I become? Lucian didn't answer immediately. Then he said, someone no one can replace. Seraphina stood very still, as if waiting for fear to rise. It didn't. I won't go back as a victim, she said. Lucian gave a single nod. Good. Months passed, measured not by social invitations but by ledgers. Seraphina learned to read financial statements the way other women read poetry. She learned how a single clause could trap a man for life. She learned that a polite smile could be a weapon if you knew what the other person wanted. When she made mistakes, Lucian corrected her without comfort. Again, he would say. When she hesitated, he did not push. He simply waited until she pushed herself. One day, after a quiet meeting with a banker who smiled too much, Lucian asked her as they left. What did he want? Seraphina answered without thinking. He doesn't care about the agreement. He wants to feel important. Lucian's eyes flicked to her face. Correct. A servant dropped a tray one afternoon. Porcelain shattered. Seraphina looked at the servant terrified, apologizing, expecting punishment. Once she would have rushed to reassure them. Once she would have tried to be liked. Now she simply observed. The servant bowed rapidly and fled shaken. Lucian watched Seraphina for a moment and said nothing. Then one evening he placed another folder in front of her. Read this. She opened it. The letter. The forged confession. Only now it was marked with annotations, proof of altered ink-paid handwriting, a witness statement. Seraphina's breath caught. It's false. Lucian nodded. The writer was paid. Seraphina's hands tightened around the pages. Then why didn't you stop it? The words came out sharper than she intended. Why didn't you interfere? Lucian finished calmly. He held her gaze. And allow you to continue believing London is fair. Seraphina stared at him stunned. He continued, if I had rescued you in that cathedral, you would have remained someone who required rescue. Her throat tightened. For a moment she wanted to hate him. Then she realized the hatred would be misplaced, because Lucian had never pretended to be gentle. He had only been honest, and the honesty, though brutal, had kept her alive. The slow burn began in the spaces where words were missing. Lucian never touched her casually, never offered tenderness in public, never softened his voice for show. But he controlled everything around her with terrifying precision. No one approached her without permission. No servant spoke to her with anything less than respect. No visitor crossed the threshold unless Lucian allowed it. One evening, Seraphina asked quietly, "Aren't you afraid I'll leave?" Lucian didn't look up from the document he was reading. "If you wish to leave, no one could stop you." A pause. Then without lifting his eyes, he added, "But you will not." Seraphina's brow tightened. "How can you be so certain?" Lucian set the paper down slowly and met her gaze. "Because you have seen the truth. And once you see it, you cannot return to being blind." The true twist came when Lucian brought her into a room she had never been allowed to enter before. It was not filled with jewels or art. It was filled with maps. London marked in ink, estates highlighted, names pinned like targets. Lucian pointed. "This family survives on debt." He moved his finger. "This one pretends to be rich. It is not." Another point. "This one will sell its own daughter to avoid collapse." Seraphina's stomach turned as the world rearranged itself. Lucian's voice was level. "Whoever controls the debt controls them." Seraphina looked at him. "You," she said quietly. Lucian shook his head once. "Not yet." He slid a document toward her. "Now, you." Seraphina stared down at the paper, her pulse steady, her mind sharp. This was power. Not applause, not admiration. Control. That night was silent. No storm, no grand revelation. Just a fire low and steady and two people sitting across from each other like allies, deciding whether to become something dangerous. Lucian spoke first. If you intend to walk back into Londonist society, he said, you cannot do so as the name they ruined. Seraphina's eyes narrowed slightly. Then what should I be? Lucian did not hesitate. My wife. The words fell cleanly, coldly, like a verdict. Seraphina's breath caught not from romance, but from the weight of the proposal. A duchess, a title no one could strip away with a rumor, a shield made of law and bloodline. Seraphina studied him. This isn't love, she said. Lucian's gaze did not waver. No, it's a pact. Yes, Seraphina lifted her chin. And in return, Lucian leaned forward a fraction. You will stand beside me as my equal. Seraphina's fingers curled slightly, not with fear, with decision. Not because I need saving, she said slowly. Lucian's eyes held hers. But because I choose it, she finished. Lucian nodded once. Exactly. They married in secret. No cathedral, no applause, no London witnesses. A small chapel on Blackthorn land, a single vicar sworn to silence Lucian's steward, present, to ensure the law was satisfied. Seraphina wore a simple gown, dark, elegant, unadorned. Not a bride begging to be chosen. A woman claiming her name. Lucian spoke his vows without poetry. I will protect what is mine, he said, voice low. Seraphina did not tremble. I will never kneel again, she answered. When it was done, there was no kiss in front of witnesses. No tender embrace performed for an audience. Only a moment private when Lucian placed a ring on her finger, heavy, unmistakable, engraved with the Blackthorn crest. And Seraphina understood what she had just become, not loved, not rescued, crowned. The turning point came weeks later in the dead of night. Seraphina woke gasping, the echo of the cathedral still inside her skull. She saw the altar, the red dress, the laughter. She stood at the window, hands braced against the cold frame, breathing shallowly as if the air itself might betray her. Behind her the door opened softly. Lucian did not speak at first. He simply stood there, present, solid, unmoving. You still remember, he said at last. Seraphina swallowed. I can't forget. Lucian took one step closer. For the briefest moment, Seraphina thought he might touch her shoulder. His hand lifted, then stopped. He lowered it again, as if even that small comfort was a line he refused to cross until she chose it. His voice was quiet, almost harsh in its restraint. I don't need you perfect, he said. A pause. I need you never to kneel again. Seraphina closed her eyes. When she opened them, the tremor in her hands had eased. Time passed. Seraphina began signing decisions that moved money like armies. She learned to shift debts, to tighten margins, to make men who had once looked through her now look down at their own trembling hands. But her name never appeared. Everything ran under titles, holdings, legal veils. She became the woman behind the curtain. In one meeting, a man asked with nervous humor, "Who is truly behind this?" Lucian's reply was mild. Not a question you should ask. Seraphina stood in a darker corner of the room listening. And for the first time since the cathedral, she did not feel like a ghost. She felt like a blade. A year after she disappeared, Seraphina stood before a mirror again. She no longer resembled the ruined bride. Her posture was different, her gaze steady, her stillness controlled. She turned away from the glass and walked into Lucian's study. "I'm going back to London," she said. Lucian looked up, unsurprised. "For revenge?" he asked. Seraphina's lips curved faintly, not a smile, not quite. "No." A pause. "To end my story." Lucian rose without hurry. "Good," he said. He turned slightly as if to dismiss the matter, then added almost softly, "This time you will not step into that room alone." Seraphina didn't answer. She didn't need to, because for the first time in her life the promise felt true, not because he was kind, but because he was inevitable. Sometimes the world doesn't break you to punish you. It breaks you to reveal what you must become. Seraphina's humiliation was not the end of her life. It was the end of her innocence. She learned that respect is not granted by fairness, and dignity is not protected by good intentions. Power in a world built on lies belongs to the one who can see the truth and still stand upright. And when she chose to rise, she didn't rise as someone's rescued bride, she rose as someone who could never be replaced again. The night Seraphina returned to London, the city felt like a mouthful of glittering teeth. Carriages rolled through Mayfair in slow, deliberate lines, their wheels whispering over damp stone. Lamps burned behind tall windows like captured fire. Everywhere there was music somewhere, always music and laughter that sounded practiced as if even joy had rules. Countess Ashbourne's ball was the event of the season, the sort of gathering that decided which families rose and which names quietly vanished. The Ashbourne mansion blazed with beeswax candlelight and chandelier fire, every crystal bead catching gold and flinging it back into the air. The scent of hot house lilies and expensive perfume layered thickly above the waltz, and the polished floor reflected the dancers like a second world beneath their feet. To be invited was to be approved. To be noticed was to be dangerous. Seraphina stood in the carriage for a heartbeat before stepping out, as if she were measuring the distance between what London had once made her and what she had become. The carriage was black. No gaudy crest, no theatrical display. Yet the footman went still as soon as it stopped, and the doorman's posture changed, subtle, instinctive, because the air around the vehicle carried something London understood, even when it could not name it. Power. The door opened. Seraphina stepped down. Her gown was deep midnight blue, so dark it was almost black beneath the night sky. The cut was sharp and clean, elegant, without excess. There were no frivolous bows, no pastel softness, nothing that begged to be admired. The fabric held its shape like a blade held steady. A small sweep of satin caught the lamplight and returned it with quiet confidence. Her jewels were restrained, but every piece looked older than London itself. A simple necklace at her throat, a single pair of earrings, a bracelet that did not sparkle so much as it watched. Her hair was drawn back, exposing her face completely, no curls falling forward to soften her, no veil to hide behind. The wind teased a few loose strands near her temple, but she did not raise a hand to fix them. She did not fidget. She looked up at the doors of Ashbourne's mansion and waited just 1 second until her breath settled into calm. Then she walked forward. The servants opened the doors without asking for a name. Inside, warmth and light wrapped around her like a performance. Conversations rose and fell like waves. The orchestra carried a Viennese waltz through the air, a melody that made even ordinary movement look like destiny. Seraphina entered as if she belonged, not to the room, above it. No one recognized her at first. They didn't connect the controlled, cold-blooded woman at the entrance with the ruined bride, who had once stood at an altar and been erased. In London's memory, Seraphina Blythe was a tragedy, something that belonged to last season, to gossip already chewed and swallowed. What walked through the doors now was something else. Heads turned, not with familiarity, with curiosity. There were whispers immediate and hungry. Who is she? I've never seen her in London. A foreign countess, perhaps. She's too... still. Seraphina moved through the room slowly, deliberately, letting the air part for her without forcing it. She did not scan faces nervously. She did not search for allies. She did not look like a woman hoping she would be allowed to remain. She looked like a woman deciding who would be allowed to stay. A servant approached with a silver tray of champagne. Seraphina accepted a glass with a small nod. "Thank you." Her voice was quiet, perfectly placed, neither sweet nor sharp. It carried the discipline of someone who had learned that the wrong tone could cost more than dignity, it could cost control. The servant backed away as if he had been addressed by someone higher than the Countess herself. At the center of the ballroom stood Sebastian Hale and Arabella Vainlord, and Lady Hale now glittering in the attention they had built their marriage upon. Sebastian wore a dark coat that made him look narrower and taller, as if he had dressed himself to appear even more unshakable. He smiled politely as he spoke with lords and patrons, receiving congratulations as if they were owed to him. Arabella was the opposite of restraint. Her gown was red, rich, dramatic, chosen to be seen from every corner of the room. Diamonds dripped from her throat, her wrists, her ears flashing with every movement. She laughed often and loudly, a woman ensuring no one forgot she had won. A man raised his glass to Sebastian. "My congratulations, Lord Hale. Your marriage was exceedingly wise." Sebastian's mouth curved. "I have always known how to choose the proper moment." Arabella leaned in, her voice silky. "And the proper person." A small ripple of laughter followed. The Countess Ashbourne herself glided through the crowd, fan in hand, eyes sharp. She knew every story in the room. She knew where bodies were buried and which scandals could be purchased. Tonight, she wanted entertainment. The Tana always did. Near the refreshments, two women leaned together, whispering. "The bride from last year," one said. "The one who was left, what was her name?" Blythe, the other, answered. "She disappeared. Probably fled to the country." Arabella, passing close enough to hear, smiled without warmth. "Some women," she said, as if commenting on the flowers, "simply cannot endure being placed where they belong." The women tittered, grateful to be included in cruelty. Seraphina watched from a distance, her champagne untouched. For a moment she felt the cathedral again, the cold stone, the organ, the way the world had turned away. But the feeling did not break her. It hardened. She set her glass on the nearest table and stepped forward. Not toward the center, not toward Sebastian yet, just forward enough that she could be seen by the right eyes. It happened like a chain reaction. Sebastian's gaze, scanning the room out of habit, caught on her. His expression did not change immediately. His mind had to catch up to his eyes. Then he stiffened. Arabella noticed the shift and followed his gaze. At first she frowned, annoyed by the attention being stolen. Then she saw Seraphina's face. Recognition struck like a slap. Sebastian started toward her. Arabella, like a trained predator, moved with him. They approached as a unit, husband and wife, an image built to intimidate. Sebastian stopped directly in front of Seraphina, his eyes traveling over her gown as if trying to place a price on it. His voice was smooth, practiced. I thought you had vanished from London. Seraphina did not offer a smile. I did. Arabella's lips curled. Oh, how delightful. The abandoned bride returns. Heads turned in their direction. Conversations thinned, like wolves sensing movement. Sebastian's tone became faintly amused, the same tone he had used at the altar when he decided her dignity was optional. Tell me, he said, what brings you back? A desire to reclaim your reputation? Seraphina looked at him as if he were something she had already finished reading. I came, she said, calm as candlelight to end a story. Arabella let out a laugh too bright to be real. Your story ended long ago, she said, in a cathedral, in front of everyone. A few people nearby chuckled softly, eager to attach themselves to cruelty that felt safe. Sebastian leaned slightly closer as if offering private advice. You should not be here, he murmured. London remembers. Seraphina's voice did not rise. So do I. The air tightened. Arabella's smile sharpened. Do you truly think you can walk into this room and be something other than what you are? Seraphina's gaze held Arabella's. What I am, she said softly, has never been decided by you. Arabella's eyes narrowed. Then who decided it? Before Seraphina could answer, the waltz faltered. The orchestra did not stop because the musicians were clumsy. They stopped because the room changed. A heavy silence spread from the doors like winter water creeping across stone. Even the Countess Ashbourne's fan paused midair. At the entrance, the household steward struck his staff against the floor once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed sharply through the ballroom. Then, in a voice that carried without effort, he announced His Grace. Duke Lucian Blackthorne. The name moved through the room like a gust. Every conversation died. Every body turned. Lucian entered as if the world belonged to him and he was merely checking the locks. He wore black evening clothes cut with ruthless precision. His coat fit like armor. His gaze swept across the ballroom without curiosity, only assessment. He did not smile at the Countess. He did not incline his head to any lord. He did not stop. The crowd parted instinctively, as if the air itself made way for him. Sebastian's face tightened. The last time Sebastian had stood in a room with Lucian Blackthorne, he had not been noticed. Being ignored by a duke was humiliation no man could pretend to enjoy. Arabella's laughter vanished. Her eyes widened, calculating. Lucian walked straight towards Seraphina. He ignored Sebastian as if Sebastian were furniture. Sebastian opened his mouth, perhaps to speak, perhaps to intercept. No sound came out. Lucian stopped in front of Seraphina. The room held its breath. Seraphina did not look up at him like a girl seeking approval. She met his gaze as an equal. Lucian's voice was low. I am late. Seraphina's lips barely moved, just in time. Lucian reached for her hand. Not gently, not violently, deliberately. He took her gloved hand and held it as if the act itself was a statement. Then, without haste, he lifted his other hand and began to remove her glove. A small movement, an enormous consequence. As the fabric slid from her fingers, candlelight caught the ring on her left hand. Heavy gold, the Blackthorne crest engraved into its face. An heirloom that could not be mistaken for anything purchased. A wedding ring that did not ask permission to be believed. A collective gasp rose as one. Seraphina did not speak. She did not need to. Lucian raised her bare hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, slow, intimate, unmistakably possessive. Then he turned his gaze to the room, and the air grew colder. You should be careful, he said, voice perfectly, even when speaking to my wife. A noble woman stammered, voice thin with shock. Your wife, Lucian, did not blink. Our vows were completed long ago. He paused just enough for the words to sink in. Then he added, as if delivering a final blow, Duchess Blackthorn. The ballroom froze. Even the Countess Ashbourne looked momentarily unprepared. Arabella's face went white beneath her powder. Sebastian's mouth parted slightly as if the shape of the word Duchess could not fit in his throat. A misunderstanding, Sebastian managed, forcing sound into the air. Surely there must be a misunderstanding. Seraphina Blythe. Lucian's eyes snapped to him. The temperature of the room seemed to drop. There is no misunderstanding, Lucian said, quietly. Sebastian swallowed, voice turning defensive. She was ruined. Her father. Lucian took a single step closer, the movement small but terrifying. Do not, he said, speak her father's name in that tone. Sebastian's throat bobbed. Arabella tried to regain control with a laugh that came out strained. This is absurd. If she were truly your Duchess, we would have known. Seraphina finally spoke, not loudly, but with a clarity that cut through the room. You only know what you are allowed to know. Silence. Lucian's hand remained lightly at the small of Seraphina's back, the touch protective and public. He looked at Sebastian again. Lord Hale, Lucian, said you have a habit of choosing advantage over decency. It has served you well, until tonight. Sebastian's eyes darted, searching for support. He found none. Lucian made a small gesture. A steward stepped forward and offered a folder sealed thick with paper. Lucian took it without looking down. Your estates, he said, are mortgaged. Sebastian bristled. Every estate in England has some debt. Lucian's expression did not change. Your debt, he continued, belongs to me. The words landed like a guillotine. A murmur trembled through the room. Sebastian's face lost color rapidly. Arabella's lips parted, and for once she had nothing clever to say. Seraphina stepped half a pace forward, her ring flashing softly. She looked at Sebastian with calm precision. You always chose advantage, she said.
I claim this seat.
You always told yourself it was virtue.
Who is she?
Sebastian tried to stand tall, but his shoulders betrayed him. Seraphina continued, voice almost gentle. This time, advantage did not choose you. Sebastian's jaw tightened. You cannot do this. Lucian's voice was mild. I already have. Sebastian's eyes flicked desperately to Arabella. Arabella's face had turned rigid with panic because she understood what most women in the room had just understood. A duke did not make empty threats. A duke simply rearranged your life without asking. Arabella hissed under her breath. Say something. Sebastian's mouth opened. No sound came. Lucian shifted his gaze. And as for the letter, he said. Seraphina felt a small echo in her chest. The cathedral, the vicar, the words that had stained her. Lucian made another small motion. Two men stepped forward, quiet, efficient, and between them walked Edwin Clark. The former clerk looked smaller than Seraphina remembered from the day Lucian had shown her the evidence. Under candlelight, he looked sick with fear. He stopped at the edge of the crowd, trembling. Lucian's voice remained calm. Tell them. Edwin swallowed. His eyes darted to Sebastian, then away. I only did what I was paid to do, he stammered. A sharp intake of breath spread through the room. Seraphina's gaze fixed on him. The letter, she said, voice soft and deadly. Say it. Edwin's knees nearly buckled. It was forged, he blurted. All of it. The handwriting copied. The ink aged. I was paid to make it convincing. The room erupted in whispers, loud now uncontrolled. Arabella shouted, voice cracking, "That's a lie." Lucian did not raise his voice. "Sit down, Lady Hale," he said, as if speaking to a child. Arabella's mouth snapped shut, more shocked by obedience than by humiliation. Sebastian stepped forward, eyes wild. "This is a trap." Lucian's gaze cut him off. "You are not important enough to trap," he said. That line alone silenced half the room. Lucian turned, slightly addressing the crowd with effortless authority. "London adores a scandal," he said, "but it should learn the difference between rumor and evidence." He glanced to his steward. Another document was presented. Lucian did not even touch it. He simply nodded once, and the steward read the summary aloud. The vein accounts, unreported shipments, illicit transactions disguised as legitimate holdings, a trail of money too crooked to survive daylight. Arabella's face turned ashen. She staggered back half a step, her diamonds suddenly looking like weights dragging her down. This is impossible," she whispered, almost to herself. Lucian's voice was quiet. "It is inevitable." Arabella's eyes snapped to Seraphina with raw hatred. "You, Seraphina," met her gaze without blinking. "I did not destroy you," Seraphina said calmly. "I only stopped pretending you were untouchable." Arabella's breath came sharp. Sebastian's entire body seemed to tighten with a last desperate attempt at pride. This is revenge," he spat, trying to make the word sound shameful. Seraphina looked at him. "No," she said. A pause. "This is consequence." The orchestra remained frozen bows hovering above strings. The ballroom stood suspended in the moment London feared most. The moment power decided to show its face.
You will regret this betrayal.
Seraphina took a slow step closer to Sebastian.
This is your end.
Not aggressive, not triumphant, just inevitable. Her voice when she spoke was calm enough to make the words feel permanent. "You think you destroyed me at the altar," she said. Sebastian's eyes flickered. "But you didn't. A beat. You freed me from everything that made me weak." Silence. No laughter now. No teasing whispers. Only the knowledge, sharp, undeniable, that the woman they had once erased had returned as something London could not afford to dismiss. Lucian's hand tightened lightly at Seraphina's back. "Come," he said. Seraphina turned away from Sebastian without another glance. That was the final humiliation. Not being shouted at, not being threatened, being rendered irrelevant. The crowd parted as they walked through the ballroom. No one dared to stand in their way. No one dared to speak. Outside, the night air tasted clean, almost sweet, after the suffocating perfume of the tomb. Lucian's carriage waited. Seraphina stepped in first. Lucian followed, and the door closed like the end of an era. The next morning, London awakened to the kind of gossip that didn't merely entertain, it changed the rules. It did not come from a newspaper first. It came from servants, from footmen, from ladies who could not resist sharing what they had witnessed because witnessing it had made them feel close to power. Seraphina Blythe wasn't ruined. She was married to Lucian Blackthorne. The Duke kissed her hand in front of everyone. "They say Lord Hale's estates are mortgaged to the Duke. They say Lady Hale's father is under investigation. They say the letter was forged. They say..." By noon, those whispers had become a tidal wave, and it did not stop with talk. The consequences arrived in wax-sealed envelopes. At Hale House, the butler carried a stack of letters into Sebastian's study, his hands shaking. Sebastian took the first. His fingers tore the seal too quickly. His eyes skimmed the words, then froze. The second letter confirmed the first. The third made it unmistakable. The fourth destroyed what little denial remained. He looked up, face pale. "What is this?" he demanded. The butler's voice was barely audible. "All loans are being called in, my lord." Sebastian's throat tightened. "By whom?" the butler swallowed. "The signature, my lord, Duke Blackthorn." Sebastian slammed the letters onto the desk. "This is temporary. This is pressure. This is—" He stopped, because even he could hear the emptiness in his own voice. Outside men arrived, not politely, not cautiously, efficiently. Inventory, assessment, valuation. Everything in Hale House gained a price tag overnight. Sebastian walked through his own halls and watched strangers measure his furniture, inspect. His paintings calculate the worth of his life. Arabella paced like a caged animal, her diamonds suddenly absurd against looming ruin. "This is your fault," she hissed, grabbing Sebastian's sleeve. Sebastian jerked away. "My fault?" "You insisted, I insisted." Arabella's voice rose. "You promised me safety. You promised me London would never laugh at me." Sebastian's eyes flashed. "London laughs at everyone." Arabella's laugh turned sharp and ugly, not at the Duchess Blackthorn. That name tasted like poison. At the Vane residence, Arabella received a letter from her father. One page, no greeting, no softness. The kind of writing men used when love was irrelevant. Her fingers trembled as she read. Assets frozen, accounts questioned, investigations open. She looked up at her maid with eyes that had never known fear until now. "They're coming," she whispered. Her maid did not answer. There was nothing to say. Arabella threw the letter across the room. "I won," she said, as if repeating it could reverse reality. "I won." But deep down, Arabella understood the cruelest truth. She had won a man who only valued advantage, and then lost advantage itself. Within days, the tone did what it always did. It shifted. Families who had once whispered pity about Seraphina now lined up their carriages outside Blackthorn House, desperate to leave calling cards. Ladies who had once pretended not to see her now begged for invitations, for introductions, for the smallest acknowledgement. The Countess Ashbourne herself sent flowers along with a note penned in elegant ink. "How delightful to discover London has been blind." Seraphina read it without smiling and handed it to a servant. "Burn it," she said calmly. The servant bowed, not surprised. Lucian watched from a distance, expression unreadable. Seraphina did not take revenge the way the tone expected. She did not throw insults like confetti. She did not humiliate people with loud cruelty. She did something far more powerful. She decided who mattered. In the Blackthorn study, Seraphina sat at a desk where papers were stacked like weapons. Lucian stood behind her hands, clasped silent as a shadow. On the desk lay a list of names, families, bankers, patrons, merchants. A map of London's veins. Lucian spoke, voice even. "How do you wish to handle them?" Seraphina turned a page slowly. "I don't," she said. Lucian's brow shifted slightly. "You don't?" Seraphina set down her pen. "They put themselves where they belong," she said. "We only need to stop pretending they can return." Lucian studied her for a moment. Seraphina continued, calm as stone. "Cut them off." Lucian did not interrupt. "No loans," Seraphina said. "No favors. No introductions. No invitations. Not one thread back into the circle." She looked up at him. "We don't destroy them," she said softly. "We simply refuse to rescue them." Lucian held her gaze. Then, for the first time in days, something like approval flickered in his eyes. Understood, he said. A week later, Blackthorn House became the center of London's universe. Carriages lined the street. Elegant women stepped down with careful smiles and desperate eyes. Men with titles arrived pretending they were merely paying respects, when in truth they were seeking permission to exist. Seraphina stood at the top of the staircase looking down at the world that had once looked down at her. A lady curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, it would be the greatest honor if you would attend." Seraphina's smile was gentle and dangerous. "I will consider it." She did not promise. She did not refuse. She let uncertainty do the work. The lady backed away, relieved to have received anything. Lucian remained near the doorway, observing. He did not guide Seraphina through her power. He allowed her to wield it, because this was the point. Seraphina did not need him to stand. She chose him anyway. One evening, after the last visitors had left and the house settled into silence, Seraphina walked into Lucian's study. He was reading as always, papers as always, war in ink as always. She stopped in front of him. "I have a question," she said. Lucian closed the folder slowly. "Ask." Seraphina held his gaze. "Why did you choose me?" For a moment Lucian said nothing. The fire crackled softly. Outside, London moved like a restless animal. Then Lucian stood and approached until he was close enough that Seraphina could feel the warmth of him, but not so close that it felt like a claim. "Because you never belonged to the world that betrayed you," he said. Seraphina frowned slightly. Lucian continued, his voice lower now. "They only saw what you could provide," he said. "A dowry, a name, a performance." He paused. "I saw what you could become." Seraphina's throat tightened unexpectedly, not from romance, from the strange ache of being seen. She asked quietly, "You knew before the wedding?" Lucian did not deny it. "Yes." Seraphina's eyes searched his face. "Before I was destroyed," she said. Lucian's expression did not soften. "I knew." Seraphina's breath left her slowly. "You stood in that cathedral," she said. "You watched." Lucian held her gaze. "I watched, and you waited." Lucian's voice did not waver. "I waited." Seraphina's jaw tightened. For a moment, anger threatened to rise, hot and sharp. Then she remembered what she had become and how she had become it. She exhaled. "That was cruel," she said, voice controlled. Lucian's answer came quietly, and for the first time it contained something like confession. "Only to that world," he said, "not to you." Seraphina stared at him a long moment. Then she spoke, voice almost soft. "Thank you." Lucian's eyes flickered. "Do not thank me for withholding comfort," he said. Seraphina's lips curved faintly. "I'm not," she said. "I'm thanking you for refusing to let me stay weak." A silence stretched between them, heavy, honest. Then Lucian lifted a hand, hesitated the smallest fraction, and finally let his fingers brush her cheek. It was not possessive. It was not performative. It was real. Seraphina did not lean away. She closed her eyes for a brief second and allowed herself that single point of warmth because she had earned the right to choose it. Months passed. London adjusted to its new truth. Sebastian Hale faded like a man walking backward into fog. His invitations stopped. His allies disappeared. His creditors grew teeth. Arabella's friendships evaporated overnight. Ladies who had once praised her gown now pretended they didn't see her in the street. Her father's name became poison, and poison spread quickly. One morning, Seraphina was presented with an offer. A man, one of Lucian's associates, spoke carefully. "We could erase the Hale family entirely. Your Grace," he said. One final step would ensure they never rise again. Seraphina did not look up from her writing. "No," she said. The man blinked. "No." Seraphina set down her pen. "They've already lost everything that matters to them," she said. "Money, reputation, the illusion of control." She met the man's eyes. "We don't need to become them." The man bowed quickly and left as if fearing he had almost spoken incorrectly to a queen. Lucian watched Seraphina from the window. His expression wasn't calculating now. It was something rarer. Pride. Because Seraphina had mastered power without letting it rot her. That was the difference between ruling and merely winning. And then one evening, the final loop closed. A lady bold enough to test boundaries said over tea, "It's remarkable," she began lightly, "how far one can rise after such misfortune." The Blythe name was once well. The tone was careful, but the insult lived beneath it. Seraphina turned her head slowly. Her voice remained polite. "The Blythe name was never weak," she said. The lady's smile faltered. Seraphina continued, calm as steel. "My father did not fail," she said. "He was abandoned by people who mistook decency for vulnerability." A pause. "Do not confuse the two." The lady's face flushed. She lowered her eyes. "I meant no offense, Your Grace." Seraphina's smile returned soft as a closed door. "Of course you didn't." After the guests left, Seraphina stood alone for a while, holding her teacup without drinking. Lucian approached quietly. "You honored him," he said. Seraphina looked down at the tea, the surface reflecting candlelight. "He deserved it," she replied. Lucian's voice softened slightly. "He would have been proud of you." Seraphina's breath caught not with pain, but with something steadier. "I stopped trying to make him proud," she said quietly. "I started trying to make his name safe." Lucian said nothing because there was nothing to improve in the truth. The final scene was not in a ballroom, not in a cathedral, not in a place built for the tune. It was on the balcony of Blackthorn House under a London sky washed clean by wind. Below them, the city glittered alive, restless, hungry. Seraphina stood at the stone balustrade, her hands resting lightly on the cold edge. She wore no crown, no tiara, no theatrical symbol. She did not need one. Lucian stepped behind her. He did not announce himself. He did not force her attention. He simply wrapped his coat around her shoulders and drew her back against him, a protective gesture that asked no permission because it offered no chains. Seraphina leaned into the warmth without surrendering her strength. Lucian rested his chin lightly near the top of her head. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lucian murmured, voice low enough that the city could not steal it. They replaced a bride. Seraphina's mouth curved, not in bitterness now, not in pain, in completion. And in doing so, she said softly, "They ended the version of me they could control." Lucian's arms tightened slightly. Seraphina turned her head enough to glance at him, her eyes steady. "They thought they were writing my ending," she said. A pause. "They were only opening the door." Lucian's voice was quiet, almost reverent in its restraint. "They created a queen." Seraphina looked back out at London. She did not feel hatred for it anymore. Hate required attachment. London no longer owned her heart. She had taken it back. And behind her stood the one man who had never asked her to be small, never asked her to be gentle for comfort, never asked her to be anything less than what she was capable of becoming. Lucian kissed her temple slow and controlled, as if even affection should be deliberate. Seraphina closed her eyes briefly. not because she was overwhelmed, because she was at peace. Below them, the city continued to whisper. But on the balcony, Seraphina Blythe, Duchess Blackthorn, stood in silence with the man who had seen her in ruin and refused to let her remain there. She had been destroyed at the altar, and she had returned as the most powerful woman in England. A society built on appearances will destroy you the moment you stop being useful unless you learn how power actually works. Seraphina's downfall was not caused by her weakness, but by the world's willingness to weaponize shame. Her rise did not come from luck or revenge-fueled cruelty, but from clarity. She stopped begging to be chosen and started choosing herself. The true victory wasn't humiliating her enemies, it was becoming untouchable without losing her humanity. Because the strongest kind of power isn't loud. It's controlled, consistent, and earned. And once you possess it, no one can replace you again. Thank you for staying with Seraphina's journey from a shattered bride to the most powerful woman in England. If her rise made you feel something, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories of betrayal, power, and unforgettable comebacks, consider liking and subscribing so you won't miss the next one. There are many more stories waiting to be told, and some of them may surprise you even more.